morning. Today's topic is transmission pricing. In the last lecture, we have seen the power wheeling, what is meant by power wheeling, and we have also seen the different types of transmission services. And we have also seen how they are prioritized. So, this we have discussed in our last class. And in the present class, we will be discussing about the different cost components in the transmission prices. Having said this, I hope that by the end of this lecture, you will be able to explain the concept of transmission pricing and also identify the components which are associated in transmission pricing. So, going to the topic, I'll start with the types of costs which are incurred in transmission services, and we will move on to the factors which we should consider when we are pricing the transmission services. And finally, I'll give a glimpse about the different pricing schemes that are adopted for transmission services. The first two are there in your syllabus. The third one, I'll just provide a glimpse of that one. Coming to the first one, the types of costs which are incurred in transmission pricing. So, first of all, coming to the introduction. Any transmission company, in our terms we do call it as a transco. In other areas they call it as power wheeling utility. So these utilities, whenever they are transporting electricity from one area to another area, or in other words what we call them as fulfilling the contracts. What type of contracts? In transportation of power from one area to another area. So any of these utilities, while fulfilling their contracts, they will be incurring some costs, and that cost now it is based upon, it consists of operation cost, what we call it as O&M. It includes everything which is associated with the daily operation of these transportation of electricity. Opportunity costs, which includes the losses which they might have faced in fulfilling this contract. Reinforcement cost, which includes the future expansion. Existing cost is the cost which has been incurred in erecting this infrastructure. So normally the final price of the transmission system is decided by these factors. And for different transactions which we have already mentioned, the impact of these costs will be varying. And now we will see in detail about each of these costs. The first cost is the operating cost, which is nothing but the costs which is incurred by a transco in carrying out its transactions, normally relating to the cost of rescheduling of generation, as well as those related to maintaining the system voltages, reactive power support, and line flow limits. So whatever the services which it offers, all these come under operating costs. Normally, in our state also, Transco is the central authority which dispatches the power from the generating stations to the distribution stations. So while doing this transportation of power from GenCos to DISCOMs, it will perform optimal power flow. It will first of all, it will identify the ATC, available transmission capability, and based upon that, they will check whether these is available or not. They will do optimal power flow, and then they will check with ATC, and then they will finalize which transmission lines are supposed to carry this transmission of power. If it is not satisfied, they will again include some more constraints, and again they will perform the optimal power flow solution. So like this, it will be repeated until you get your desired solution. Next is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost includes those costs which the Transco has foregone its benefits in order to provide a transmission service, it might have foregone some of its benefits. So whatever the benefits which it has foregone, it will try to extract them from the users. So those costs, they'll be represented as opportunity costs. So normally what happens is Transco might be having some cheaper generation resources. It might not be in a position to utilize those cheaper generation resources in order to transport or fulfill a contract. So those benefits which it is missing, those will be covered under opportunity costs. Next is reinforcement cost. In the reinforcement cost, there is nothing but the cost which is incurred by the Transco in planning for future aspects. Generally, it is applicable only to firm transactions. So, whatever the new transmission facilities out there, the capital cost which is required to accommodate a transmission transaction in this new transmission facilities, it is called as reinforcement cost. Normally, existing cost for all the erecting of existing infrastructure, whatever the investment has already been made, that is to be recovered, right? So those costs come under existing costs. So having said this, we have seen four different types of cost. One is the operation cost, and next comes opportunity cost, and next comes the reinforcement cost, and lastly existing cost. And coming to the end, we'll be discussing with the pricing of power transactions, how power transactions should be priced. So the objective of any transmission pricing scheme is to allocate all or part of the existing and new cost of transmission system. So whatever the cost which you have decided, whether it is opportunity cost or operating cost or reinforcement cost or existing cost, all of these are part of this should be transferred to the users. However, in our country, most of the tariffs are being set by the local governments or the central governments based upon the policy directives from CERC, Central Electricity Regulatory Authority, and Central Electricity Authority. These will normally make the policies which are required for setting up of transmission pricing. In spite of this, the transmission pricing strategy should seek to achieve the basic goals which we will discuss now. So, what are the things which we should consider when we are pricing the transmission? So, first of all, our concept must be being a Transco employee or owning a Transco. My primary motto will be how to recover the costs, because I have mentioned that I do have so many costs which I have incurred during this transmission. So as already mentioned that there are operating cost, opportunity cost, reinforcement cost, existing cost. So all the costs I am supposed to recover them through this transmission pricing, right? So whatever the tariffs which I decide, they must produce enough revenue for me to cover all the expenses or all the costs which I have made during this investment, planning, operation, and maintenance. So that is the first motto for me. The second thing is, whatever the pricing which I am setting here, this price structure, it must be it must be such that it must encourage efficient usage of the transmission lines. It doesn't mean that everybody who pays it uses the transmission lines in an inefficient way. So I must provide some sort of incentives also for those who use it very efficiently. Efficient usage in the sense that it must be just like maximizing by both economic and also technical efficiency. So whoever tries to improve the efficiency of the transmission system, I should give them benefits also. So my pricing should always encourage efficient usage of my transmission system. At the same time, whatever pricing mechanism which I adopt, it must encourage efficient investment. So the price structure and the way money is paid to the owners should provide an incentive for investment in new facilities. So whatever the pricing which I decide as a transport utility, it must encourage me to make sufficient investment for the future. And also, what are the prices which I decide? They must be fair enough. They must be equitable to all the users. and also they must be understandable even by the common man. And finally, they must be implementable also. So with this, I will close this topic of how the pricing schemes and what are the major features of pricing schemes. And the different types of pricing schemes for transmission. We do have two different types of schemes. The first one is based upon the embedded cost biased paradigms, where it is based upon the total transmission cost allocation to various transactions. The second one is about incremental costs, where we do identify that there is some additional burden because of one transaction, and we will penalize those guys who are creating this type of additional burden. And there are schemes which use both of these things, which we call it as a combinational scheme. So the first one, which we call it as an embedded cost-based transmission pricing, where they consider the embedded capital costs, whatever the capital costs which have been included in that one, and the average annual operation cost of existing facilities while determining the transmission cost. So let us suppose if I use this transmission line for 1 year. So a user has utilized this one. So whatever the operation cost, maintenance cost, and also the existing cost. So these will be an opportunity cost and reinforcement cost. So all this will be calculated, and the average value will be decided. That will be decided as a transmission price. So including the embedded costs, both capital and also maintenance and operation, that is the primary motto between this embedded cost-based transmission pricing. So how it is calculated, as mentioned already, for each transmission line, the net planned cost is calculated for each year of the transaction period. Okay, so whatever the costs which are included, which I have already mentioned, the replacement cost, the operation maintenance cost, then the service life and expectancy, depreciation cost, everything should be considered, whatever we discuss in economics. So based upon that, the cost will be calculated, and that will be used for determining the price of transmission. And there are different schemes of embedded cost-based transmission pricing. One is postage stamp method, rolled in embedded cost. The second one is contract path. The third one is a boundary flow. The third one is megawatt mile method, which is used extensively nowadays, megawatt mile method. In rolled in embedded cost and contract paths, we don't utilize the optimal power flow solution, and they will be very simple. I don't go deeper into them. But whereas these two required OPF methods, optimal power flow is to be done before I allocate transmission services. And in this one, the other one is incremental cost-based transmission pricing, where I do employ this short-term marginal cost-based pricing. And yeah, the second method is long-run marginal cost-based methods. So I'll give the glimpse about these two things in the class directly, short-run and long-run marginal cost methods. But do remember that one of the widely used methods so far is the megawatt mile method, the line-by-line method, which we do generally call it as. This is one of the pricing scheme which we do employ for transmission prices. Okay. So I hope now that you are able to explain the concept of transmission pricing, and I hope that what mechanisms and what factors should be considered when we decide the transmission pricing. And these are the lecture level questions. Practice these questions, and we'll meet in the class. Thank you.